And now to revisit some of our top stories today, we're joined by Mark Toth, co-founder of Intrep 360. Good evening, Mark. Good to see you again.
Good evening, Sally. Great to see you as well.
So let's start with the latest Russian attacks. Friday's deadly double-tap strike on Kryvyi Rih involved jet-powered drones. It's a shift from the slower Shaheds Russia's traditionally been using. So how have Russia's aerial capabilities and tactics evolved?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because their tactics are evolving. So is their technology in terms of being able to send drones that are capable of traveling much faster, reaching the target, making them much more difficult to hit. That's especially key right now, given the shortage of Patriot interceptors inside of Ukraine and frankly around the world. So that is giving Russia an advantage here. But it's also interesting that the target that Russia has chosen to strike was this shopping center in Kryvyi Rih. It wasn't just a single strike, it was a double tap strike, meaning they hit it twice to hit it after responders started to try to save people. It was messaging because obviously, as most people know, Kryvyi Rih is President Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown. And I think the fact that they're continuing to try to take this war to Ukrainian civilians as much as they're trying to take it to the Ukrainian army tells you that Putin still thinks he can destroy the morale of Ukrainians. It's a failed strategy. It didn't work for Hitler in World War II, and it's just not going to work here, yet Putin keeps trying it. So all he's doing right now, as you pointed out, is just using the latest advanced technology to keep trying the same old tired tactic. The tragedy, of course, is that innocent people die, and in this case, a lot of innocent civilians that simply were out to shop.
Now, turning to Thursday's ballistic missile attack on Kyiv, as you said, the problem is that Ukraine simply doesn't have enough Patriot interceptors, and global production can't keep pace with demand, so it seems. France has just pledged additional interceptor missiles, but that surely won't be enough. So what can Ukraine do in the meantime to protect its cities?
Right. Now, Ukraine's trying quickly to bring its own Firepoint version of the Patriot, a much cheaper system. It's not as accurate as a Patriot, only costs around $700,000 compared to millions of dollars for the U.S. Patriot version. But they can't bring them online quickly enough. And frankly, my country, the United States, has failed in terms of getting Ukraine the licenses that it needs to produce the Patriot interceptors on their own. They critically need these. Ukraine has proven very resilient about creating cottage industries that can wide scale produce different military components. We've seen it in their drone industry. We've seen it with respect to their own ballistic missile program that is still in the makes, but getting closer by month. And we definitely would see that in the Patriot side as well. But I think at this point in time, because Ukraine cannot overcome that, France's move here is welcome, but it's too, late in coming. Ukraine has to keep what they've been doing more of late, Sally, which is to focus on the ballistic missile capabilities of Russia. There are roughly 49 key sites, manufacturing sites related to that. And the latest over this weekend strikes we saw went after, for instance, in Rostov in Russia, a solid fuel production plant. So Ukraine gets what they've got to do. They just need to do more of it, and they need more European support to bring more products on the line to be able to deter and destroy Russia's ballistic missile and drone capabilities.
Now, we've just heard from Emmanuel Macron. Today, also German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul is in Kyiv, pledging continued support for Ukraine. A while back, we've also heard from British Prime Minister Andy Burnham, who said that UK will continue to back Kyiv 100%. Now, beyond those pledges, what concrete support are we likely to see from Ukraine's allies in the coming months?
Yeah, no, Sally, it's a great question. Look, from a messaging standpoint, given, as I mentioned, clearly Putin was sending a message to Zelensky, the Ukrainian people, by hitting that shopping center in Kryvyi Rih over the weekend. But messaging is not enough. I applaud the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Andy Burnham, as well as the French President Emmanuel Macron, for saying the right things, but we're past words, we're past messages. There needs to be, concrete action. This is not a new war. It's 4.5+ years now in the making. The critical shortages of patriots are nothing new. Europe has to act more. And so I'm a little bit hesitant to say, what do we see next? Because we keep seeing action committees, we keep seeing messages, but what we don't see is actual deliverables happening, meaning getting Ukraine the interceptors that it needs to protect its civilians and critical infrastructures. Because as I wrote in The Hill with my colleague John Sweet a couple of days back, winter is coming, and Russia is going to try to weaponize that again to try to set conditions for its spring and summer offensives that it has planned for 2027. So Europe has to stop acting and start doing, is what we're at.
Mark, I wanted to go back to...
In my country too. In fairness, my country too.
To what you've said earlier, because Ukraine appears to be trying to address the problem at its source in a way. Because in recent strikes, Ukraine says it targeted the Saki air base, damaged radar and drone storage facilities, also took out relay stations in Bryansk used to guide Russian drones towards Ukraine. So are we seeing a more systematic effort to disrupt the sort of entire chain behind Russia's air attacks? And how effective will that be moving forward?
Yeah, we are. We wrote about this in our Intercept 360 several days back, where Ukraine is starting this systematic approach. It kind of went under the radar early in 2026. They have started this process. But if you can take wild berries as an example, because I think most people have seen those images of the logistics warehouses, their e-commerce version of Amazon here in the United States getting hit. Ukraine has slowly but surely started to attack the supply chain, if you will, the manufacturing chain that's needed in order to produce the ballistic missiles and Shahed drones. They share a lot of components together, rocket fuel, as I mentioned, the solid rocket fuel plant that was hit in Rostov. But there's radar systems, there's GPS systems, there's all types of targets that are spread out over hundreds of different locations throughout Russia that are manufactured, but some of them come together in key assembly points that Ukraine can also and has been targeting as well. So, as the saying goes in the military, if you can kill the archer before he can launch the arrow, you're doing yourself a big favor, because an archer can fire many arrows, in this case, many ballistic missiles and many drones. But if you can destroy them on site before they can ever get launched, that archer, be it a mobile drone launch site, a mobile Iskander launch system that delivers most of the ballistic missiles, or even their air-based cruise missiles and ballistic missiles coming from those platforms that come from airfields, then you're doing yourself a big favor. And Ukraine has to do more of that. It's got to do more of that for one big reason. It's not going to get enough interceptors online initially, so it's got to take the fight to the source, which is where these are being launched and produced.
Now, in addition, Ukraine has also been waging what it calls its own sanctions campaign against Russia, systematically targeting refineries and other energy infrastructure. We're now seeing fuel shortages spread across Russia, even reaching Moscow. How long would that pressure have to continue before it reaches a breaking point?
Right. At this point, it looks like Putin has been able to, handle the internal pressures, the domestic pressures that is placed on Russia. Clearly, we're seeing borrowing going up as a percentage of their GDP. Russians are having to borrow more, meaning the government, not the people. And so it is putting pressure on them. I think Ukraine has to continue to sustain that. It's not going to be able to destroy Russia's oil and gas industry, but it can heavily curtail it, and it can deny them the higher, oil prices that are currently being gotten on the global markets right now because of the Mideast crisis. So, from that standpoint, I don't know that it would be decisive, but I think it's certainly inflicting enough damage on Putin that it creates these domestic pressures. And in the run-up to the September Duma elections that Russia's going to be holding, you've seen Putin more and more commenting publicly about what Ukraine has been doing and trying to downplay it, say that it's not that effective, it's not going to affect, the Russia's economy or its capacity to wage war. But the fact that he's talking about it is a big thing, and it tells you it is impacting his economy and his, ability to continue a special military operation in Ukraine. And so from that standpoint, Ukraine has just got to keep it up. But in order to continue to win, if you will, they've got to stop Russia's ballistic missile and drone capabilities. I think that's their biggest initiative going into the winter, because that's what's going to protect them. And just real quickly here, Sally, I'd add, that's what Europe has to enable. They have to understand this is a deep fight inside of Russia, and Ukraine needs all the help, technological, production, materials, support, et cetera, along with its own air defense assets to protect Ukrainian civilians in the meantime. The war is now, and it's happening.
And Mark, finally, Kazakhstan heads to the polls tomorrow, but I want to focus on President Tokayev's recent approach to Russia. So just last month, he publicly urged Vladimir Putin to consider ending the war in Ukraine and returning to negotiations. Are we seeing Kazakhstan trying to loosen its dependence on Russia, and how far can Tokayev realistically take that?
Right. No, it's a great question. I think Tokayev probably has gone as far as he can. He's made it clear that Kazakhstan does not support Russia's territorial claims on Ukraine, including Crimea. And that's a good thing. That's a win for Zelensky and Ukraine as a whole. In terms of the upcoming elections, I think most forecasters believe that they will result in Tokayev, having more power. Now, that said, Kazakhstan is feeling real pressure itself in terms of oil exports and the like because of the war. And so I think he does continue to try to do a balancing act, which is to say, the war in some way somehow has to come to an end. And his preferred approach to doing that, as you mentioned, is, freezing the conflict where it stands now. Now, Zelensky himself has said that to get Putin to the negotiating table. So I think from Ukraine's standpoint, I'd call them limited wins. Kazakhstan, at least, is not against them, but for them in some ways, but it's not going to be decisive. But still, I suspect that these elections, once they're held and tallied tomorrow, that they'll come out and Tokayev will come out of them stronger for it.
Mark Toth, co-founder Intrep 360, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing your views.
My pleasure, Sally. Thank you. Good evening.
And thank you for watching World News Tonight. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.